So basically, essentially, the director wanted to make it into like a battle royale.
Yeah, we got a cool axe versus sword, Native American versus black guy with rabies fight. That's why I get my steak pies from Greg's, because this week it's I Drink Your Blood from 1970, written and directed by David E. Durston.
When a group of satanic hippies wreaks havoc in a small town, a local boy gets revenge by spiking their pie with rabies.
The biggest double horror show in history. I Drink Your Blood will make your blood curdle and your skin crawl.
Well, if you watch Weekly, you can see we've been on a bit of a Tarantino tear recently. You know, I was watching loads of old interviews with him and trying to find like rare interviews to get insights and clips of him talking that haven't maybe been used a lot in other YouTube videos. Naturally, he likes to chat about films a lot, especially old films, especially old Grindhouse films, especially old violent 70s Grindhouse exploitation films. So he was talking about this crazy film where there's a bunch of hippies going crazy and they get fed rabies and then they're going even crazier. And I was like, fuck, I gotta watch that. In fact, he actually seemed to misremember it because he described it as a group of bikers that came into town. So I was nearly, as I started watching the film, a little disappointed, but forgot about that pretty quickly because right from the opening scene, it's nighttime, the only lighting's from a campfire, and you've got these naked group of hippies led by this Native American Horace Bones, who's clearly modelled on Charles Manson. The whole group is clearly modelled on the Manson family, and they're doing this freaky, naked, blood orgy style, fake sacrificial ritual, cutting a chicken's head off, pouring blood all over this naked chick. Man, there was a lot of nudity in 70s films, wasn't there? Like, it really was a thing. Like, it's funny how mainstream films nowadays are more violent and more crazy and more edgy than even the crazy exploitation films from this era. But there's way less nudity in films, even like the craziest films or the most controversial films nowadays. Like, you really don't get the same amount of nudity that you used to get. But yeah, like I said, right from the get-go, I was like, okay, so I'm not getting a crazy biker gang, but I am getting Manson family style crazy hippie gang, which is just as good, if not better.
Put aside your worldly things and come to me.
You've got to think this film came, what, a year after the Manson family murders? Really shocked the public. It was kind of seen as the symbolic end of the free-loving experimental 60s where it all came crashing down and suddenly, you know, these peace-loving, music-loving, progressive hippie culture suddenly had this really ugly new face in the form of the Manson murders. And, you know, it changed everyone's perspective on things and probably scared the fuck out of your average small-town, God-fearing, all-American regular Joe, which is exactly the setting of this film. You know, it's a very small town, population 40. Most of the town's closing down. It's kind of become a ghost town nearly. In real life, it was actually a town that was pretty much being demolished for whatever reason. So it's playing in that whole setting. But the crux of the plot is that they're not just some crazy cult wreaking havoc. They also contract rabies halfway through and become rabid psychos. And supposedly the writer and director was hired by pretty well-known, famous exploitation film producer, Jerry Gross, to make him a low-budget horror film. And he had writer's block for a few weeks trying to think of something. He was thinking maybe something around the Manson murders, but even though it was just a year before, there was a lot of films and media and stuff either directly about the Manson murders or clearly influenced by it coming out. So he wasn't sure if he wanted to just rehash another one of those. But then he saw a newspaper article about a small school in Iran that was attacked by a group of rabid wolves. Most of the children and the two teachers ended up contracting rabies. He found a Western doctor who had worked in that area and treated a lot of the patients who had footage. And he said he was watching this grainy black and white footage of these small children with foam at their mouths and convulsing and freaking out. And he said the hairs on the back of his neck stood up and he was absolutely freaked out.
This group of villagers from the backcountry of Iran were all attacked and bitten by a rabid wolf. They have come to a local facility of the Pasteur Institute in order to receive treatment.
The two ideas meshed together, and this is the result we got.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I thought hippies loved each other, so I was a bit confused as to why there was Satanic. But I think we've had a lot of biker films, so I was quite happy that it was hippies, quite a bit of change of pace. It would have been cool with bikers, but I'm happy with it as it is. And, you know, the Rabies, I'm quite interested in Rabies. Weird to say, but I've seen like a lot of stuff online. I think mostly from India. There's a lot of like wild dogs going around biting people, and the latest stage of the virus when they're in the doctor's surgery and they're foaming and they can't drink water, and then if you get it early enough with like the vaccinations can be cured, but once the foaming happens you're basically dead.
So there's two types of rabies supposedly. I don't know what the technical terms are, but in common speak they're known as like dumb rabies and furious rabies. Dumb rabies is where you become incredibly passive, mute, nearly like a ghost inside a shell, like you're just not there anymore. The one we're kind of used to, especially when it's used in popular culture or movies or horror films like this, is the furious rabies, where the person becomes delirious, hallucinating, anxious, volatile, and sudden bursts of activity. Now, it's incredibly rare, apparently, that a person will actually bite another person, simply because, you know, they act out and they're violent, but generally humans don't bite, usually. Yeah. And you don't completely, until the end, lose your sense of self. It's kind of like you're going through a manic episode. You might become violent, but you're not going to automatically start biting someone. One of the things that I actually didn't know about at all, the hydrophobia, which is probably the most interesting and weird symptom, where you become not just unable to drink water, but kind of terrified by the sight and the touch of it and the smell of it. You see these videos online of people literally unable to drink water or freaking out at the sight of a glass of water being handed to them, and it's just, what an odd symptom. Like, what how does that come, like, how did that evolve?
There's only one scene where we see them play on that. Someone finally puts it together that they're infected by rabies. I mean, it must have been pretty obvious if they're foaming at the mouth, like straight up, and then someone said, we'll be safer by the lake or the coral, and then they go in and they're just like splashing them, and then they're like, but the hydrophobia is insane. I wonder what that is. It must change something in your brain, I guess. I've actually seen a dog infected by rabies. I think it might be in Greece.
Oh, you saw it in person?
Yeah, there's loads of stray dogs walking around, and me being a kid, like, you automatically want to like look at the dog, and then my dad held me back and was like, oh, that one's got rabies, because it had all white shit around its mouth. Obviously I didn't have a clue, but I was like, fucking hell, you know. So ever since then I became interested in it. It's just such a strange virus, man.
It's amazing what those sort of parasitic viruses can do to change behavior. There's one called toxic plasmosis. It's really common in cats, and generally it affects rats and mice. It causes a lot of different behavioral things and aggressiveness, kind of like rabies, but one of the main symptoms is it makes the mice sexually attracted to the smell of cat urine. Basically, the virus or the parasite wants to end up in a cat, but it's a lot easier to pass through rats and then go find cats, because, you know, they're naturally the prey. And it overrides a natural instinct of, that's a predator, I need to run away from that, to do the opposite. It's compelled to go towards it. And it's crazy, but it also gets passed to humans. And one of the interesting things is it causes really reckless behavior in humans. In fact, in motorcycle death injuries, when they do postmortems and tests on the person, a lot of the time it's like 60% of people who have died in motorcycle accidents have this condition. So it seems to correspond in humans with much more reckless, thrill-seeking, dangerous behaviour. And French people, who are known to, you know, I actually really like French people. Surrender. I enjoy their cuntiness, but they're known to be really cunty. Yeah. They have, of any country in the world, the highest percentage of this parasite or virus or whatever it is running through the population. It's really, really high. So you wonder, like, is that a part of their general kind of like abrasiveness?
So let me just get my head around this. It basically makes rats commit suicide in a way.
Essentially, yeah.
And in the case of motorcycle riders, even though they're kind of committing suicide by being reckless.
Because that particular symptom, I assume, only works in rats.
Yeah.
But it literally makes them compelled to seek out the smell of cat urine. So it's just a way of getting them in proximity. And to be honest, it's hilarious. There's videos online where this mice is running at these cats, desperate to get near them. And even the cats are a bit like, the fuck is wrong with this guy? They're not automatically pouncing on them. You can tell they're a bit like, what the fuck? You know, when when you see videos sometimes of some lunatic person who's out of their mind and they climb into a zoo exhibit and they're like running up to lions and tigers, a lot of the time they're just kind of looking at him like, huh? Like they don't want to go after him because they're kind of like looking at each other like, what is this weird little bald monkey doing?
I've got to move on to the French thing now. How are they catching it?
I don't know.
Is it something they're eating? Is they like...
I mean, you can catch it from being near a cat. It's not something that will kill you. It's not something that will even, I don't think, really cause you any real medical issues physically. There's probably all kinds of conditions that are quite widespread that you don't really know about because they're so commonplace and don't cause that many problems.
But now I'm scared because I was just literally stroking my cat before I came round here.
Well,
so I better, of course.
Feeling reckless.
Yeah.
You don't seem like the motorcycle riding type.
So set in a small town. Seems to be like all these films are always set in a small town, mostly, you know what I mean? Like, there's been a couple that are in big cities, but it's just, I guess it's just better for the plot if it's a low population. Nothing going on in this town except a big building development near it where all the builders are working, and a little bakery where all the, seems to be the hub of the town really. And like with any small towns in films, you've got an annoying little kid, which is in this film, an older person who does stupid stuff, that happens in this film, and for some reason always some very good looking daughters.
Yeah, the women are smoking hot.
Yeah, like...
Speaking of which, going back to the opening scene where the whole weird ritual's going on, you notice this one chick hovering about by the trees watching it. She's clearly not with them because she's hiding behind a tree and she's clothed. The main Native American guy, Horace Bones, notices her and he's like, who's that? And two guys go running after her. And this younger cult member, who's this guy called Andy, and he's kind of just like, oh no, that's a local girl, I invited her to watch. The Native American guy immediately bitch slaps him, was like, what are you doing? Like, obviously that's a dumb idea. Two of the cult members rape poor Sylvia to this weird kind of upbeat tune. And then when Andy gets slapped because he's like, oh, I brought her along, it's nearly in a sort of slapstick sort of way. So it's kind of a weird tone around this whole what is essentially a rape happening. But, you know, it's the 70s.
That was weird.
70s exploitation film. That's what's going to happen.
Are we supposed to be dancing to this rape?
Sylvia emerges out of the woods the next morning and she comes across her younger brother and Mildred, who runs the bakery. They bring her back home. She's like pretty much comatose and freaked out. We meet the granddad also, like you're saying, the sort of doddering old man who's a complete idiot.
Retard, man.
I gotta be honest, obviously they're the bad guys, but until the shit starts properly kicking off in the second half of the film, they're the source of entertainment because they're fucking wild. Like, they've already had a crazy ritual, they've committed a rape, their van breaks down, they realise, oh, we gotta walk into town, but one of them's asleep in the back. So their idea of a practical joke is to roll the van off a cliff while he's in it.
Yeah.
And he just emerges out fine in the end of it, like, oh, come on, guys.
It's kind of like broken down because you're following the fun satanic hippies, and then on the other side you're following the hunt for who raped poor Sylvia. I know who will ask. The foreman of the building site, he knows everything. We see them talking. Well, solving rapes is outside of an engineer's remit.
Yeah, because it seems like there's a lot of construction going on, so I guess there's guys from out of town. They seem to have a bad rep because Mildred, the girl who runs the bakery, who's going out with this big construction guy, but they seem to have a shit relationship. Well, she's always complaining about him anyway. She's like, one of your workers raped my friend. And he's like, what? Like, what happened? Who is she? And she's like, well, it must have been them. Who else would it be? So you're already a bit like, that's, you know, fucking, why don't you go in and like test the waters first before you go straight in with the accusations? But he's also kind of like blowing it off. He's doing the old, she's hysterical. Like, she doesn't know what she's saying. Is she okay? Blah. Kind of dismissing it all.
How do you know one of my men did it?
Who else could it be?
The hippies are going around, and we know, don't we, that they're eventually going to come across this small town. So you're just sitting there in anticipation. Get to the town. What do you think of the filler scenes with the practical jokes and hijinks? And...
Yeah, they were some of my favourite bits because, you know, I knew what was coming. I know, like, there's going to be a crazy rabies-fueled carnage. But, you know, sometimes these sort of films, you understand they need to do the horse shit of introducing the characters and setting the scene a bit. And, you know, this person doesn't like this person. And, they planted a little seed of something with this character, so that will come back later in some way. But you're kind of just waiting for the shit to hit the fan.
100%.
Whereas this film, I was loving it, you know, because the shit's kind of already hit the fan. Like, this horror film could have just been about the hippies coming to town because they're already nuts. They're all tripping on LSD the whole time, doing weird rituals. They immediately start squatting in this old broken down hotel. the younger brother, who doesn't yet know they're responsible for the rape, but kind of notices them going in, says like, oh, you know, be careful in there. There's loads of rats and stuff, and it's haunted. And they're like, rats?
We'll kill them all.
Brilliant. And you get this whole long scene of them running around hunting rats by hand and then killing them and barbecuing them and eating them, and they're just fucking having a great time off their tits on drugs. And I was like, this is like 10 minutes in. you don't usually get this bonkers of a moment this soon into a film like this.
So we'll have a rat hunt. We'll barbecue them.
But I was kind of thinking, if they're eating rats, they could have easily caught rabies that way.
Yeah. Good point.
I was like, so you didn't have to do the other thing later on.
Yeah, that's actually a good shout. Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
But yeah, anyway, so the boy goes back and reports to the granddad. Straight away, he puts two and two together and says, oh, it must be them who's raped poor Sylvia. So I'm going to go and confront them. And like, predictably, it doesn't end well, does it, Declan?
He completely fucks it up.
Yeah,
like, firstly, he does everything wrong. He knows where they are. They don't know he exists. He's got a shotgun. They're not armed other than like their knives and stuff.
Yeah.
He sneaks up on them successfully. He's got them banged to rights.
Jesus.
And he's caught them murdering someone.
Yeah.
They've randomly, on their first night in town, decided, let's trip acid and just kill one of our members for no apparent reason. He's not dead, but he has the shit kicked out of him. He's tripping. He's been doped. They stabbed him up a bit. They've got him hanging, but not with his neck broken. He's just kind of being strangled, and he's probably near death. The only reason he's not dead yet is because Andy, he's a cult member, but he's kind of like, you know, when you see a group of wrong-ins who go around probably looking for someone to mug, and you can tell the guys are the real deal, and then you can tell the hanger-on who's kind of like,
Don't think we should be doing this, guys.
yeah, like he's a bit like, oh, like I'm not actually about this.
Yeah.
And he's that guy. He's down for some crazy shit, but he's like, we can't just kill someone. Like, we'll be fucked. Like, we'll get in loads of trouble. But yeah, like the old man, he's shown up alone. Stupid. He's snuck up on him, but then just announces with a dumb question of, like, is that guy okay? Dumb. Then he's like, the whole point of having a gun is you're over there and I can kill you. You can't do anything to me while there's distance between us. And then he allows him to get within an inch of his face. If I was just in a friendly situation with someone and they got that close, I'd be like, back off a bit. Like, why are you getting so close for? He just allows them to get right up to him and doesn't even have the gun pointed at him.
Yeah.
So naturally, you know what's going to happen next.
He also picked the worst gun, because I swear a shotgun can only fire 2 shots before you have to reload it.
Well, think about it. All right, you've got only 2 shots. There's 6 people. But if you blast the first guy's head off and they know you have 1 shot left, is anyone going to fucking do anything? I mean, these guys might, because they're fucking nuts.
Back to Andy. I just have the feeling that he's part of this gang simply because he's bored. Like, he's bored of that small town life. Nothing's really going on. You know, we live in London. We're never bored. But imagine living in some far off place where there's one pub. You'd want a bit of entertainment.
Well, yeah,
you know?
I mean, these cults don't usually attract well-adjusted people with satisfying careers and stable family lives. You know, you attract these bored, lost, usually young losers who maybe have gone through something traumatic or don't have many bonds or are vulnerable or spiritually lost. And it is an interesting group. Like, you look at the casting, I mean, it's like the fucking United Nations. There's an Asian girl, there's a black guy, there's a Native American, there's a fat white girl, there's a mute deaf girl. It's just a real mix between them. It's really multicultural. Makes sense for hippies, but it's kind of funny where you think like they're the villains and you got this super white, happy, nice, all-American town, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. It exists and it should exist. But in terms of casting, if made today, say on Netflix, the demographic profile of the villains versus the good guys would probably be exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was surprised they didn't kill him, if I'm honest with you. They let him go.
Well, they don't let him. Well, you don't know,
let
do
him
they?
go.
Because they drug him with LSD, so he's all fucked up. They beat the shit out of him. It's only because the younger brother shows up, and he, unlike his granddad, actually has some brains. He refuses to go in. He's kind of knocking on the door and being like, "What's going on in there? Where's my granddad?" And that sexy chick comes out, and she's like, you know, come in, blah blah blah. Oh, you're a young strapping man, but he's having none of it. I'm not going in there. Bring him out. They eventually bring the granddad out. I think partly because they're nuts. They're crazy people, but they're not homicidal maniacs. They're somewhere in between. I bet they have killed people, but they're not the family from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They have a sense of self self-preservation. They still have a sense of, we can't just kill the guy because then we're in deep shit. You know, beating the shit out of him, drugging him is one thing. We murder him, especially when there's a witness that knows he's here. You know, the police are going to be after us. Like, let's not cause trouble.
Yeah, but I struggle with that because they've obviously like more or less murdered one of their own cult or whatever you call it, and they've also raped someone. So I don't know. I know what you're saying, but it's a hard one to say. Like maybe they only do shit when they're like really high or something. Like maybe they're always high, so I don't really know. But he goes back with his tail between his legs, alive but badly beaten up, and ever since then the young boy becomes the guy who, out of all of them, wants to get revenge.
I fucking love this little kid, man. He was a little gangster. He had the best head on his shoulders. He was like the Terminator. Like, he was just always on a mission to do what needed to be done. My granddad's a fucking idiot. He's probably fucked it up. I'm going to go save him. Once granddad's back, he's like, I'm going to go fucking get revenge on these people. Gets the shotgun. He's headed out, but then he comes across this rabid dog and he kills the dog. So he's already like, fuck, I need to go reload. But then he gets a new idea where we see he starts taking the rabid dog's blood, shows up the next day at the bakery that he's worked at, that he knows hippies have already come to for food, so they're probably going to come back, and he spikes a bunch of pies with the blood.
A bit dangerous though, because like, how did he know that they're going to eat those exact pies?
Well, he Mildred, who runs the bakery, who's seemingly the ideal wife. Like, she is fucking gorgeous and just nice. I mean, a bit moany, but her boyfriend is a bit of a dick. But she's also just a real sweetheart. Like, even though they're clearly gross hippies and they're being kind of dicks when they first come in, she gives them the food on like half price because she thinks one of the girls is pregnant, and to get her to bake the pies that he's going to eventually spike for the hippies, he says like, oh, they're in the hotel and I think they're hungry, they don't have much money, and she's like, oh, well, we can't let people starve, can we? But she's going to give them different pies, but he makes sure it's the right pies going to the box. Also, I didn't really see many customers going in and out of there, so he probably could have had those pies sitting out for a week and no one else would have eaten them.
I'm certain that those builders would have gone there though, man.
Good point.
Builders love a bakery. Well,
that's true.
They actually do love a bakery. And then lo and behold, the satanic hippies eat the pies. You're just sitting there thinking, let's fucking go. Like, we've waited for the rabies, so let's have it. They don't know that, of course. They just know that they're getting unwell and have stomach problems. And one by one, they succumb to the rabies. And obviously, we know as the viewer, Declan, that rabies makes people violent. So you're sitting there thinking, shit, what's going to happen? It was just a funny scene. I wasn't blown away by it, but I guess what else could they have done? They have to work it out somehow. Rolo seems to take on the virus quickest, and then he starts becoming rabid. The poor guy that was hanging up earlier when the granddad comes to investigate is still alive. So I don't know how long this has been, maybe a day, he's still going. And then Rolo savagely finishes him off, and Andy, who's fallen asleep through it all and he's been caring for him, looking after him, wakes up and witnesses it. So it all fucking goes 1 to 100 very quickly.
It's interesting as well because it's not like they go rabid and immediately start attacking all the townspeople. It kind of becomes its own mini horror movie amongst themselves initially before that happens, because like you said, not all of them have come under the influence straight away, so they're starting to freak out and scream and run away and be victims of the other rabid people, and then they're eventually start to become rabid themselves. Interestingly, one stupid thing is that it kind of plays off zombie rules because the moment someone's rabid, they're no longer a potential victim from other rabid people, which didn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
But fuck it, it works for the story. And this film was actually influenced a lot by Night of the Living Dead. The director was a big fan of it, so naturally you can see a lot of those influences in it. But yeah, shit starts really kicking off and the hippies get dispersed because, one girl runs into the woods because Rolo's gone mad and he's killed the guy and he's found an axe and he's chopped one of his legs off and he's like chasing her with a leg down the road and she runs off all scared. Horace is becoming rabid but still quite lucid. He seems to kind of understand. He seems to nearly be enjoying it in a weird way. He's like maniacally laughing and freaking out. And it's hard to tell sometimes as well because they're all tripping on so much acid all the time. You don't know where the effects of the acid end and the oncoming effects of the rabies starts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
And it's smart because we need them to all disperse because naturally they need to spread the rabies to the rest of the town's population to build up the numbers of the rabid monster people that are going to terrorize the rest of the survivors.
Yeah, and all the while you're just sitting there thinking like, what's going to happen? We've seen earlier when they're talking about phoning the police police, and they specifically say, oh, the nearest sheriff is 8 miles away. So I'm like, shit, like, even if they contact the law, it's going to take them ages to get here, and by that time, it could be a bloodbath.
Classic horror movie trope as well, where you always have a time frame that you give the film where it's either like in Aliens, where the whole thing's going to blow up in a certain amount of hours, or it's we have to survive until help comes at this certain amount of time in the future.
So you're sitting there thinking, like, we've seen that they have guns, but like we've seen one gun that the city granddad has, like, do the rest of the town have it? There's only 40 people here, as we know already, and they need support. So you're like thinking, what's going to happen?
So I've got a bone to pick with Sylvia. She only knows so much because obviously she doesn't know the younger brothers spiked everyone with rabies, but she's spoken to Andy already once. He's told her a bit of what's going on or whatever, and he explained like, oh, I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't know the guys were going to act like that, and that was really out of line. I don't think that's good. And he shows up the next night while no one else is in the room. The sister opens the window and he's like, oh, meet me in the barn. And she's like, okay. And then she goes in the barn and they start kind of like fucking.
Yeah.
Or start getting ready to fuck. And I'm a bit like, not to be a stick in the mud, but you're like, you don't know he didn't know the guys were going to rape you, for sure. But you do know that he's with them and hanging out with them and arrived with them and seemingly keeps that sort of company. And now she's ready to fuck him, and it's a bit like...
That is weird.
No, and also you're like, Andy's a bit of a don as well. He chatted her up and said, oh, come check out this weird ritual where we kill a chicken for some reason. That's a good first date. So she was showing up to that, and now he's banging her in the barn within a day of meeting her with the worst possible introduction. And you're like, how much of a stud is this guy? Or how depressing is this small town, and how awful are the options are?
Probably say it's the latter.
Bit of both.
Because it's a 40 population, so they ain't got much of a choice.
Andy or the granddad.
Yeah, basically.
But before Andy can get lucky in the barn, the brother shows up with a flashlight because he's worried about what she's doing, and he spills the beans that he spiked all the pies with rabies. Andy realizes like, oh, I didn't even eat one of the pies, so I'm fine. But they're all a bit like, shit, we need to go warn the police or the authorities and track these people down. And the sister's a bit angry at the kid, which I guess I get. It's a pretty reckless, mad way of dealing with the situation.
Yeah.
But still, it's a bit like, yeah, sorry, I was trying to like handle this situation and this problem of these crazy people that are raping our sister and beating up our granddad while you're busy fucking one of them. Like, go fuck yourself.
I mean, like, he could have just simply got an older person to contact the cops and be like, there's these hippies that raped my sister.
And then the film ends in half an hour and we're sitting here bored.
Yeah, true.
So the cat's out of the bag now, so they alert the authorities, but there kind of is no authorities in this town. And the closest thing to an authority is, like you said, the foreman who's overseeing the big construction site. Overseeing the... is it a construction site or is it a quarry? It was a quarry. It's more of a quarry. But anyway, he's like the foreman of the quarry. Mildred goes and tells him, and she's like, listen, there's a bunch of homicidal, crazy, rabies-infested Manson family members running about this town, fucking people up, raping people, raping everybody out in here. So we need to do something about it. Like, he's a bit like, fuck, like, I guess I'm the closest thing to an authority figure. So, all right, he gets all his foreman crew together. You go out here, you go out here. You guys go and check out the hotel. Everyone scatter around and figure out what's going on.
I don't really get it. Just because he's the foreman of a building site, he then becomes the expert in what to do.
It actually, do you know what? It's not that weird. It makes a lot of sense. Where I'm from in Ireland, where I go visit obviously a lot and see my family, incredibly rural, to the point where you couldn't even call it a village. My grandparents lived on the side of a mountain. You'd have neighbours, but each of them might be a couple of 100 metres away at the closest, and then the next one might be a mile away. Like, it's not a village even. In London, say, I don't know what it is, maybe it's 1 in 1,000 people's a policeman, probably less. When your population's 40, how do you support having even one policeman? How do you support having a doctor? You know, where I'm from in Ireland, I was getting a cab home from the pub one night. It might be a 2-hour wait, and they'll probably be picking up another 7 people along the way and dropping them off, because that's just what you got to do, because there's one taxi driver and he's also the local butcher, and he ended up having to drop us off early somewhere else or get someone else to pick us up because he's also the volunteer fireman, and a fire had broken out, so he had to leave. So it's that thing where you just make it work somehow. And it's the reason the whole idea of being a deputy became a thing, because you always see like sheriff and the sheriff's deputy. That is his job all the time. But the idea of deputizing someone was, this little town, there's one sheriff and there's a murder on the loose. He'll deputize maybe 5 or 6 guys, which basically gives you like a temporary police status to do police things. So you have the authority to go restrain someone, because that's just what you got to do in towns like this. So it actually kind of makes sense where he would become the authority figure here.
I get that. That's a very good explanation. I retract my original
way.
No, that was a very thorough explanation. But yeah, they're going around foaming at the mouth. That she's already told them that they have rabies. The most logical thing to do is go to a body of water, but they don't do anything. I just think there could have been a better use of water to try and eliminate them. But
Well, to be fair, we do have Mildred at the end hitting them with the hose. Should have gone to the fucking local Toys R Us and got a bunch of super soakers.
yeah, or like as you said, there must be like a fireman somewhere. Giant hose, bang, knock them all down, scatter them at least.
So the various quarry workers and construction guys all headed out in different directions. One group is obviously headed to the hotel, where there's still a lot of the rabid hippies are hanging out. They find a really sexy honey trap chick wandering the streets. She's just immediately given vibes of, hey, help me out, I'll fuck you guys. So they're like, oh, sweet. So they're driving off and she's kind of like partying with him, getting drunk. They reach the hotel and they start to go in. She's like, I'm not going in. And they're like, okay, wait 1 second. She's like, I don't want to be left outside. So she's like, hey, let's go fuck in the barn. So all the guys are immediately like, sweet, let's do it.
We can have more fun outside.
What's the big rush?
Yeah, damn rats couldn't wait.
Meanwhile, 2 other construction workers search the hotel. They come across dead bodies and blood and start getting all kinds of freaked out. They eventually get into the attic where the Native American has a trap waiting for them. His friend who'd been killed has dropped the gun and it's lying just between himself and the Native American. So they're having a little standoff where he's eyeing it up, doing the whole, I'm going to go for that, you know I'm going to go for it, but no one's moved yet sort of moment. And then he dies for the gun. They start wrestling around and Horace gets the better of him and fucking kills him.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying because in all these scenes, if you know it's not near the end of the film, you know that the other guy is not going to win. And that's what happens here. But it was quite a good little fight, I thought. What did you think of it?
The special effects of the gore are mostly really bad, but I enjoyed the actual set pieces of the violence. Earlier on in the day, you had the mute girl and fat chick who have run off and haven't quite become rabid yet. I guess they ate less of the pies. I don't know how that happened with the fat girl, but
yeah.
Or maybe it's just,
She should have been the first.
Or maybe it's like you can drink more when you're bigger sort of thing. I don't know. Maybe it's taking longer to kick in, but they've managed to find this random little house and this nice old lady's helping them out, saying, oh, you must be hungry, let me make you some food. And she's got this electric meat carver carving this meat up, and she puts it down to start plating up and make a sandwich. And you see the mute girl going for it. You know what's coming, and it's very slow as it's getting into it. And I guess watching this back in the day, it would have been more horrifying, and you could take your time like that, because even in exploitation films, like this sort of level of violence was quite new. So you'd be like, surely not. What's she going to do with the turkey thing? Whereas where like the moment we saw her start carving meat, we're like, okay, what's going to get cut off with that? Like, is her head going to get cut off? Is like, how's that going to get used? It's quite a long build up to her actually cutting it, and then we don't see it. I assume for limitations of the special effects, they couldn't actually show it getting cut off, but I actually quite liked it because you don't know what they've cut off, but then you see the woman run out and her hands completely cut off and she's freaking out. The fat chick's now freaking out because she's like, oh shit, the mute girl's gone crazy. She runs away. I don't know if she's even aware that it's because the pies have been spiked, because she might have run off before they kind of put that together back at the hotel. So she's freaking out. And it's good because they start off as villains and then they go to this next level of villainy because of the rabies, where they're essentially monsters. But it's slow. So I like the fact that what are the villains to begin with get to become victims for a period before becoming villains again. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's quite, I wouldn't say unique, but it's quite different and distinct among horror films. Like there's not that many dynamics where you get that. So I was actually really enjoying that element to it. And it was interesting, you know, the potential population of victims doubled immediately.
I just found the turkey carving scene comical. As you said before, you hit the nail perfectly on the head. We've seen films such as Terrifier, Gorefest, Saw, you know, people chopping legs off. So to not see it, you're kind of like, ah. And then it cuts to the front door of the house being burst open and her without a hand. And as you pointed out, the special effects are crap. Let's be real about it. We can see from the opening scene that this is a very low budget film, so you can't be expecting very good practical effects. But then again, in Night of the Living Dead, the special effects were better than this, you know. So I don't know.
Spielberg, like his famous quote from Jaws, was, which I don't even know if he really said, but it's a great quote where you get so many problems with films on set, like anything that can go wrong will go wrong, especially with special effects. But that can be the best thing in your film. You know, the shark didn't work, so you barely ever see the shark and it's all POV, and the less of the shark we saw, the better it was. It really made the film, and he had to come up with clever ways around it, like the buoys that they've hooked to it, showing where the shark is, but you never actually see the shark most of the time. Those clever little things. And probably in Night of the Living Dead, you know, George A. Romero, amazing director. He could take the limitations of the special effects and use it or work around it in ways that made the film even better. But the problems can only be a good thing for the film if you're really talented enough, I guess. If you're not, then they're just going to be clunky problems. And, you know, this director he wasn't the best. Like, it's not the best directed film in the world. Pretty good. Like, I liked elements of it. I liked the whole idea, the writing, the concept. But yeah, like you say, you know, it's kind of ropey. But you said it was comical, but did you enjoy it for that reason?
In a respect, I felt sorry for her. She's being a nice old lady. She's making him a sandwich, but to be fair, I had a smile on my face, especially when she ran out with the no hand.
I know, yeah.
I did find that very
And that's a funny thing where I forget sometimes that these films were meant to be taken seriously. Most people our age, our introduction to exploitation films was the homage era of filmmakers like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, where they loved those films and they were poking fun at them even when they were doing it in a serious... Like, they wanted it to be taken seriously, but they weren't taking it seriously, if that makes sense. But I forget, that only came after the fact. With spaghetti westerns, we love the fact that it's dubbed badly. That's part of the charm. Yeah. But those directors, from Sergio Leone to whoever, if they could have had it dubbed perfectly, they would have.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure this film was meant to be taken completely seriously. And I'm sure people did take it seriously when it first came out. You know, I'm sure they were running out of theatres and fainting and all those stories you hear. So I forget sometimes, I'm like, oh, this film isn't supposed to be funny. Yeah. I'm just supposed to be terrified by that terrible looking special effect of the woman running out of no hand.
Sometimes it is hard to not think it's funny because the plot is just so outrageous. If you deep it, as they say, the plot is hippies eating rabies pie that a 12-year-old boy injected with rabies. It's just mad. Like,
yeah. So the sexy chick is still banging the guy in the other outhouse or wherever it is, but she starts to become rabid and clawing at the guy's back, and she runs into the toilet. Really sexy scene, you know. She fucking got tits out and everything. Yeah. The guy runs in after her and he's being a dickhead about it because he's like, look what she did to my back. And the other guy's like, take it easy, man. I need to fuck her after. So he's like, I'm going to cool her down. So he starts putting her in a cold shower, and obviously she doesn't really enjoy that. So she starts going completely mental and breaks out and is found dead the next morning. Bit mysterious though, because we don't see her run off dressed. Last we see her, she's in the shower, so kind of curious if the construction workers had something to do with it. Meanwhile, the family, minus Grandad, who's been killed, plus Mildred and now Andy, are trying to get out of town or get to safety. But in the light of day, we start seeing all the townspeople and all the construction workers emerging out of the hotel or the different buildings. We get the telltale foam at the mouth of all of them, and they're all gone nuts. And I like it where it's kind of like the crazies. They're not zombies, they're crazy people, and they're carrying weapons still, and they're lucid enough to know how to do things. I don't think they could drive a car, but you know, they can pick up a tool and open doors and things, and they kind of know what they're doing. They're laughing and enjoying themselves seemingly and going nuts. So it's a different sort of tone to rather than like a zombie film or a rage virus film. And it becomes basically 20 minutes of carnage as shit's hitting the fan. Everyone's running away. The rabid townspeople are running around causing havoc, trying to kill people. They're getting surrounded, and I wasn't expecting this, but Andy gets his head cut off in probably the worst special effect of the whole film. Again, it's a cutaway. We don't see his head get cut off. We see Andy kind of surrounded by him, and one of them swinging something at him just as the door opens, and the rest of the gang gets into the bakery and closes the door safely. And then you see that one of the happy construction workers foaming at the mouth, holding up this awful prosthetic head of Andy.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised about that. You know, as you said just then, he had become someone that we're now supposed to like, even though he was a scumbag.
He felt like he was going to survive to the end. It was the only surprising death in the whole film.
So I was like very surprised when it cut off, but then like obviously the other people running into the bakery saw it, but they don't seem that upset about it. They just don't seem to say anything. They're just like,
It's funny as well because at this point I could tell things were really kicking off, but there was still a lot of characters left in terms of like the villain character and the original hippie members who, as much as I wasn't expecting Andy to die, I was expecting them to die. And I looked at the time at one point and I was like, wow, there's 8 minutes left.
Yeah.
They got to do a lot of killing in this last 8 minutes, and they don't fuck around. Like I said earlier, I thought it was funny how the Rabid people seem to ignore each other, but seemingly they don't always when it suits the plot, because the original cult members all seem to be wanting to attack each other, although ignoring everyone else for whatever reason. Horace, the Native American, is about to attack the Asian cult member, but then she sets herself on fire and seemingly kills herself for whatever reason, which definitely, I mean, they completely bend the rules of what are rabies symptoms, but they definitely, I don't think suicide is a symptom, definitely not.
At all.
But anyway, she sets herself on fire, so that's going on. People are breaking into buildings all around him. All of a sudden, Rolo shows up with an axe. Horace has a sword and get into a Kill Bill style fighting pose, and they start battling it out amongst all the carnage. It's just great. It's just nonsense.
I didn't really get why they would start fighting amongst themselves. Weren't they meant to be friends?
They'd already killed one of their supposed friends.
True.
Before they became rabid, so I don't know if you could go by that. When it suits the plot, the rules of what the rabid people are like gets bent and changed.
So basically, essentially, the director wanted to make it into like a battle royale.
Yeah, we got a cool fucking axe versus sword, Native American versus black guy with rabies fucking standoff and fight. Meanwhile, rabid people are breaking into the bakery and going after Mildred, but Mildred's turned into a badass at this point, and she's got a shotgun and blasts one of them in the face.
I was hoping that when this was all happening, it would kind of like turn into a sort of Precinct 13 thing where they're like under siege in the bakery, like setting traps or...
Was it Draw's Rift?
Yeah, like... What do you think of the carnage?
I really, really enjoyed it. The last 20 minutes of the movie, I was like fully delivered on the carnage that was promised from a whole town becoming rabid. And explosions and people setting themselves on fire and sword fights and fucking unexpected deaths and people getting decapitated and shotgunned in the face. It was mental. You know, the special effects were bad, but it was, you know, I kind of enjoy that in these sort of films. Yeah, I love the carnage.
The heroes get to the car, minus Andy, whose head is locked off. He's dead. Well, number one, I was thinking, not to detract from the point, like, why haven't they just driven off already? I didn't really get that. Like, they had ample time to drive away.
Another excellent point that would have ruined the movie.
Yeah. So they get to the car and you're thinking, yes, they're going to get away. But, you know, there is a cast of rabid, rabies, infected people, and they turn the car over and you're thinking, oh, shit, we're not going to have a happy ending here. Like, all the heroes are about to get eaten alive. And the cavalry turns up, kind of like at the end of Night of the Living Dead, where they're just shooting everyone, and the ending was a bit strange. It kind of ended a bit abruptly.
Yeah, you get this, you know, everyone gets pulled out of the car and they're kind of like, oh, we're saved, happy, oh, everything's going to be okay. But the little brother is nowhere to be seen, and we see this random shot as the credits roll of him kind of walking off with a gun into the woods. I didn't really get that ending. I thought, is it supposed to be suggesting he's gone rabid or what? I don't really know. Now, apparently, when this film got released, it's in the history books because it was the first ever X-rated film without having any pornographic material. It was just for the violence, and as a result it was still going to normal theaters because it wasn't deemed pornographic, but theaters were, you know, it was unprecedented, and they were a bit like, well, this film's X-rated, like, what do we do? Like, we're not filth peddlers, like, we're a normal movie theater. When the reels would get delivered to them, they would go in and start making their own cuts and their own changes. And as a result, you know, this wasn't a coordinated effort, obviously. So as a result, you actually ended up with literally hundreds of slightly different versions of this film in circulation. And the version we saw, I don't even know if that was the original cut that the director sent to theaters.
Right.
Supposedly there was another edit where everyone becomes rabid in the end, even after they're rescued, and you see they start to cake on the symptoms because maybe they've been scratched or bitten. But depending on what part of the country you were in America or what movie theatre you went to, no one was exactly seeing the same version of the film. It's quite a weird thought when you think about it.
Yeah, I wondered if that sort of cliffhanger ending was setting it up for a sequel that never got made or something. That he's just walking off into the distance. He comes across another town where some of the hippies have escaped, and I don't know.
It didn't really happen back then.
I just couldn't wait. It was kind of like The Sopranos when it fades to black.
I was thinking about it last night for some reason. funny you bring that up. I fucking hate that ending.
Yeah, I'm like, what's going on with this?
Yeah, so do you recommend I Drink Your Blood?
I'm always quite happy to review a film that I have never seen, let alone heard of. Short runtime, about 1 hour, 23 minutes or something like that off the top of my head. So there's a lot of plot holes in it, but we're not here for the amazing screenwriting and Oscar-winning performance. It's like, as a premise with the Rabies, I thought it was quite clever. So I would actually recommend it.
If you like these kind of films, I definitely recommend it. It is a fun, classic old Grindhouse exploitation film. You know, literally released originally as a double bill, so you know it's a proper legit Grindhouse film. It even has the Tarantino seal of approval. It's one of those films where you do have to love these sort of movies to get anything out of it. If that bothers you, you really won't, because it, you know, special effects don't hold up at all. If you don't find that charming, you'll really hate it. You'll not even find those sequences comical. You'll probably just find them flat and boring. But as a concept and as the way it plays out, you know, it kind of is in a bit of a subgenre of its own. It's not a zombie film. It's not a rage virus film even. A lot of not unique but distinct things about it that make it really interesting. It was going to be remade by the original director at one point until he died, and the project got cancelled back in 2010. And it's one of those films where, as much as, you know, we decry about the amount of remakes that get made, don't remake Halloween because it was a classic to begin with. Remake this because it's a really fun concept and an iconic film, but it's ropey as hell and it's perfect for a remake. You know, the kind of films that should be remade are iconic classics that just weren't actually that good to begin with. If you like exploitation films, then that's an easy recommendation for I Drink Your Blood.